On today's show, can Noah Clowney be a long-term contributor for the Nets? I'll tell you why his chances are better than the numbers would indicate on today's episode of Locked On Nets.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to Locked On Nets right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. I'm your host, Erik Slater, Brooklyn Nets beat reporter for ClutchPoints.com. Thank you for making me your first listen of the day. The show is 100% free on all those great platforms. And on today's episode, I got Lucas Kaplan back on the pod. We're going to talk about Noah Clowney, the up-and-down season he's having, the up-and-down start to his career, and what the long-term outlook for him as a part of the Nets rebuild. Let's go. All right, back on the show now. We got Lucas Kaplan of Nets Daily. And Lucas, we're here today on this bonus episode to talk about Noah Clowney, who I think has been one of the stranger players, I think, to evaluate for this Nets team this season. I want to answer the question in this episode of, do we think that Noah Clowney, say we're looking at a point in the future, say 3 or 4 years into the future, will Noah Clowney be a rotation player on a playoff caliber team? That's the question that I want to answer. And if you look at Noah this season, he's had a very up and down season. Like, he had the beginning of the season was rough. Then he had that real breakout stretch where he looked like he might have been turning a corner. And then he's had some struggles as of late. But I've still come away fairly encouraged by Noah. And I think that there is a decent chance that he can be something in an NBA rotation moving forward. Is he going to be like a starting level player? I think there's serious questions about that. But I think that he's shown enough tools that I think he can be something. To what level, we'll talk about. But yeah, like Noah for the season, 12.8 points, 4.1 rebounds, 1.7 assists, 40, 33, 80 shooting splits. And it's really been like the highs have been really high, the lows have been really low. But when you evaluate what Noah has done this season and that question of, can he be a rotation caliber player down the line, what is your takeaway from what he's been able to do?
He's a really weird player. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but like the two things that really have popped about his game this season, or at least they have to be staples of it going forward. Here's a list of every NBA season in the last 10 years with a 63-point attempt rate, meaning at least 60% of his shots come from three, and a 35 free throw rate. So 0.35 free throws for every shot attempt. It's Noah Clowney this year and 2 Garrison Matthews seasons. But that's it. And he's 6'10", and like you hope that the play, like finishing on defense, continues to grow. Like I think he's gotten better there over the course of the season, but like the switchability and perimeter stuff, like very early in his career, we heard, doesn't he kind of look like Nick Claxton, like on broadcast and stuff? And like, I totally got it because of the frame and some of the ways he was sticking with perimeter guys, but that has kind of fallen off the table. So before even evaluating like how high his ceiling can be and what he will be on a really good team, you just got to appreciate that he's not a player you see very often. Like, even if he wasn't forward sized and grew up playing forward / center, I mean, you got to think in Long Island, he was playing the 5 his rookie year, and now he's Garrison Matthews usage. So he's an interesting guy.
Yeah, he's definitely an interesting guy. And for me, kind of the highs, as I said, are really high. The lows are really low. Like, you see the moments where it looks like he can do all of these different things at a good level. But then that like also brings into the question for me, like, what is the thing that he's doing at a really high level? Like, is there the one skill or one area of the game where he's going to be able to have, like, you could say, like an elite skill or a really high level skill? And I'm not sure I really see that. Like, the thing that you would have said was the 3-point shooting. In this season, it's kind of been more of the same. Like, he's really streaky as a shooter, but I pulled up these numbers, and over the last 4 seasons overall, so this is college, NBA, G League, all of his games, he's shooting 32.7% from 3 on 6.6 attempts per 36 minutes. So not high level, obviously, on like middling efficiency. You can say, look, he's 21 years old. He was a big man for most of his life. Like, he wasn't shooting from the outside, so he has room for development. But, I do have the question of, like, if he's only going to be a low 30s three-point shooter with, even though he's gotten better, like, he's not a guy who's that versatile with the ball in his hands offensively. Where does that leave his offensive role? We can get into the defense. Let's focus on the offense. But when you kind of look at the question that I just posed, like, if he's a below average shooter and he, isn't like the most natural on-ball creator, even though he's got better at it, like, where does that really leave him?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the very obvious question is, can you be successful if you are a below average three-point shooter who mostly just takes threes? And I don't think it's a coincidence that his offensive game has declined as teams, and I've said it on here before, especially above the break, Noah Clowney wants to take an above the break three. We're good with this as a defense. Short closeout, barely a stick hand. I don't know what the answer is other than he's got to start making shots. And it's a big sample. It's getting to be a bigger sample, but again, he's only 21. So it feels like unsatisfying or lame analysis, but it really is. The dude has to make threes, and I think his role is obviously dependent on that, but it's not a role you see a lot where it is boost our three-point rate, boost our free throw rate, but also on the other end, you're probably more of a big forward type. Mm-hmm. So, like, positional and role categorization gets hard. Like, you wonder what kind of lineup he would fit in, because you can't just stick him on, like, your opposing guards. Although they've tried it this year sometimes. Like, sometimes he guards Josh Giddey. Like, sometimes he guards LaMelo Ball for, like, a possession or two. Harden every once in a while when they would play. So I like that the Nets are trying a lot of stuff with him. I can say that.
Yeah, offensively, let me simplify the question. Let's say, like, we know the shooting's going to have to get better. Like, as you said, he needs to make shots, which the Nets are confident that he's going to be. Look, like, you're not going to say you're not confident in the guy, but Jordy Fernandez, Sean Marsh, whoever's talked about Noah Clowney, they said, like, he's going to be a good shooter. So they clearly feel that way. So assuming that he can improve as a three-point shooter to be, like, decent, have you seen enough of the on-ball creation, the foul drawing, the driving, the two-point finishing? Because the two-point volume has gone up, I think, slightly, or maybe it's around the same, but the efficiency has gone from like 40% to 50%, and the free throw rate has gone through the roof. So have you seen enough of that other stuff to think that he can kind of survive on the court in a playoff series? Not right now, but based on, like, the trend line of where he's going as somebody who doesn't just have to be a three-point shooter.
Yeah, I think so. I think you do. I mean, we'll see. He's still just 21. It has to improve, but I wouldn't rule it out, because when you think about where he's coming from, like you said, big man for most of his life, like, this is still relatively new for him. And when you think about, hey, look, the 2-point percentage is coming up. Hey, this free throw rate is way up. Hey, I do see, some passing flashes every once in a while. I'm not counting that out as a possibility. Like, let's say he starts shooting high 30s and drawing closeouts. He's not going to be, like Royce O'Neal with the extra passes and stuff. But again, not disqualifying, especially because his length and wingspan should give him this defensive upside as well. Like, for me, it's hard to totally separate the offense and defense. I know you asked about the offense, but because of all of the kind of particularities of his game and his size and all that. But yeah, that's my answer to the question.
Yeah, no, and I think that's really fair. And I want to talk a little bit more about his background, from a basketball sense of, like, what he was playing. He spoke about that recently on a podcast, and I think that does a good amount to inform why you think that he could have a positive trend line moving forward. Then I want to talk a little bit more about his defense, and then it's just overall impact this season and why, despite the numbers being lackluster sometimes, it has been an overall positive. So we'll get into all that when we close out Locked On Nets after a quick break. It's tax time, but for a lot of us, the old way of doing taxes is a lot trying to book an appointment that's not the most convenient, sitting in an open waiting room with a stack of papers, emailing back and forth and wondering if they really get your situation. But this year, you're going to get a major upgrade. Intuit TurboTax now has in-person locations nationwide. You can meet face-to-face with a real tax expert, and your documents get uploaded straight to your TurboTax app on the spot. And just like that, you're done. Your TurboTax expert works to get you every dollar you deserve while you get real-time notifications as you go about your day. It's the relief of walking in and meeting a real person and walking out knowing your taxes are being handled right. Head to turbotax.com/local to find a store near you and book your appointment. Guys, there's nothing like being in an NBA arena, the crowd, the energy, the moment. Getting tickets, though, that part hasn't always been so simple. That's why Game Time has become the go-to app for scoring tickets fast without the hassle. It puts the advantage back where it belongs with the fans. Guys, you'll pull up the Game Time app, pick an upcoming NBA game, and you'll have tickets locked in within minutes. You'll love seeing the all-in price up front, no surprise fees at checkout. Being able to see the view from the seat before buying makes the decision easy, and zone deals will stand out. Choose the section, Game Time picks the seats, and you'll save big. Great last-minute options, too, with NBA tickets showing up at solid prices. So take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. That's code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today, and remember, it's gametime.co, not .com. All right, coming back from the break, closing out today's bonus episode of Locked On Nets, talking about Noah Clowney with Lucas Kaplan. And we were talking before about the trend line and some of the stuff that Noah's being asked to do offensively, whether his three-point shooting or some of the stuff as a ball handler being new to him. And I think that that's really important because, like, you look at some of these guys like Noah, who are 21 years old, they're in their third season, they're still kind of at a rudimentary level as like an on-ball guy or a shot creator. And you say, like, it's just not going to happen for this guy. But Noah's one of those guys who's like, he was tweener center forward, like in college coming into the NBA. And he actually spoke about it on the Old Man in the Three or the Young Man in the Three, I don't know which one it is, podcast with several of the other Nets rookies. He was on that. And he said, like, I was a big man. Like, you know, in high school, like he was a center because he's one of these guys, like he's not one of these guys who was kind of smaller and then he grew late. So he had like the guard skills and then he kind of developed into this bigger guy. It wasn't that way. It was the opposite. Like he was always one of the biggest guys. And now he's being asked because he's not like center size in terms of height or like bulk, like a guy like Day'Ron. He's being asked to do this other stuff. He's being asked to create more on the ball. He's being asked to shoot three-pointers at a really high rate. So that gives me some level of encouragement that, like, we've seen a positive trend line. You know, I think the shooting has leveled off, but we've seen, I think, somewhat of a positive trend line with that. And this season, the two-point stuff has gone up a lot. And I think that, you know, a good amount of that has been due to the bulk that he's been able to add and a little bit of strength. I think the skill level is going to need to catch up. But yeah, like all of that stuff that's kind of my hypothesis for why I see potential for a positive trend line. Like, what's your opinion just based on his basketball background and kind of how we see other prospects come up in the NBA now?
Yeah, I certainly buy into that, and that's a reason for optimism. I mean, even before that, like I said, I watched a lot of his rookie year in the G League, and they would run 5-out offense, and so even as the nominal center, he would be spaced in the corner and whatnot. But it was still a lot of setting screens and diving and getting in the short roll. And then you got to think about last year, his sophomore season is his first full-time NBA season, and as in not going back and forth between the G League, and he gets hurt a ton of the season. He only plays, you know, it's like stop and start and stop and start. He barely gets above 1,000 minutes in total. And this season is his real first full NBA season, you know, without a lot of injury interruptions. And he is fulfilling like a really specific directive from the coaching staff that is unlike what he's done in the past. And he's about, 80% from the free throw line right now, which is a great shooting indicator. There's a lot of reason for optimism. And I have a couple comparisons that I've been thinking of and looking at, but is there anyone that kind of comes to mind? I know I just talked about how like unique he is and stuff.
Honestly, no. I mean, I feel like I just look at like that kind of tweener forward position, and it's kind of tough to like find a guy in that mold who also fits like the same skill set Like, I think of a guy like nowhere near the same type of player as Noah Clowney, but just like Obi Toppin was kind of like that tweener 4-5, but his skill set is just so much different because he's like a freak athlete and a very physically imposing guy. So not off the top of my head, but what are the comps that you had in mind?
So after scaling down some of the 3-point attempt rate and free throw rate, to widen the search, and then lowering usage, because obviously you get like a lot of high usage guys that draw fouls and shoot threes. You get similarly sized guys are like Trey Lyles, Maxi Kleba, and Kelly Olynyk. Olynyk a little more of like that 5-out center, but I'll send you this screenshot. If you go to like if you're into the analytics, if you're into the all-in-one numbers, Darko DPM, Noah is already near net neutral at an age before any of those guys approached that. The only one who was in the league at 21 of those guys was Trey Lyles, and Noah's outpacing him. Maxi Kleber's NBA career, and I think he was a valuable role player at his peak. Didn't start until 25. Kelly Olynyk peaked the highest of these guys, probably as we would agree on and per Darko DPM, which is a predictive all-in-one metric. But he didn't get, above water, net positive until he was 25. And so I'll send Erik the screenshot and I'll post it on Twitter. But like for his, I guess, general like comparison group, it is really important to talk about his progression and his age and his background, because it's a hard archetype to be like this floor spacing forward that also drives when, as a lot of those guys did, you grow up playing center. So yeah. I think that's a valuable point of reference for sure.
Yeah, and I think if you look at, on-off stats are always a little wonky, and like the Nets have had some terrible benches as of late, but they're 6.4 points better per 100 possessions with Noah on the court versus off. You can say he's been sharing the court with Michael Porter Jr. and some of those things, but still, like, take that into mind. Last thing I want to talk about is the defense, and that's where, look, I think that Noah has some good moments as like a low man, weak side rim protector, some of that thing. He's been in that spot a lot because the Nets play at the level with their centers so much. I will say there's a lot of defensive possessions where I think that he just leaves a lot to be desired in terms of physicality down low, and the rebounding numbers have been what they've been. And I think that this is a gripe that Nets fans have with Sean Marks. And like, you put Noah Clowney alongside Nick Claxton, like Thin Towers, whatever, nickname you want to use, like just guys who don't play with a ton of force. And I think that Noah's gotten better with that offensively. He's had some better rebounding games as of late, but he's still a guy. Look, he's 21 years old, so he's not like Nick, who's 25 or 7 or whatever he is by now. But like, he's a guy that, just based on like his frame, the rebounding, the way that the NBA is getting bigger, another guy that you have to kind of worry about down the line. How much can he really bang down low? How much force can he play with on that end? So when you look at what Noah's done defensively, how big of a concern are those things? And what do you think some of the other strengths that maybe he brings to the table can outweigh it?
Yeah, I do. And then again, this goes back to what role he's in, because if you're relying on him to boost the defensive rebounding as a 4 or even a tweener, you're going to be sorely disappointed. But like, do I think he might have the range and athleticism to help be a rim protector of sorts on the back end? Yes. It could be almost a guy you could look at, and hopefully a little better than this, is Michael Porter Jr. in Denver, who next to Aaron Gordon and Nikola Jokic was a really positive influence on the defensive glass. When he, was playing the 4 without Aaron Gordon, not so much. When he was playing the 3 and in tandem with Aaron Gordon, like a weak side rim protector, a low man, then he's adding value that way. And so I think, I really like actually how the Nets have approached his development, because a lot of what he's done has been trying to counter that, saying, hey, well, if you shoot all these threes, right, and if you can guard the point of attack a little more, which remains to be seen, then we can put you in lineups and deploy you in a way where your physical limitations aren't as prohibitive.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that was a good takeaway. And I think both of us kind of land in a similar spot on Noah. I think that on the surface, if you look at the numbers, it can be worrisome in regard to he's in his third season, but there is a lot of context that comes into the play, with him, with the positional change, with the role change, with the way that he was in and out of the lineup this season, and with the highs that we have seen him reach. So I do think there is reason to be encouraged about Noah Clowney's trend line and his development, and we'll see, because he's going to have a lot more opportunity, you would think, next season, which will be a pivotal season for him with the Nets. But Lucas, that's all we got for this bonus episode. Appreciate you for taking the time. Nets have another matchup with the Heat on Thursday. We're going to have a mailbag episode coming up. A lot of exciting stuff as we reach the close of the season. But yeah, man, appreciate taking the time, and we'll have you back on soon. That does it for today's episode of Locked On Nets. Hope you guys enjoyed the talk with Lucas. If you do not already, make sure to subscribe to Locked On Nets on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts, whether Apple Podcasts or Spotify. If you enjoy my content, take a second right now, smash that like button, leave a comment, leave a 5-star review. Anything you can do to engage is much appreciated. And that's going to be back in action on Thursday against the Heat. I'll have more coverage in Miami on that. Also got a mailbag coming up on Friday, so I'll have coverage of all that and more when I'm back tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.